What is Dark Souls 2 trying to say? Spoilers for the game Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 is one of my favorite games. It is the best of the trilogy and does some things even better than Elden Ring when it comes to world building and storytelling. It is that good. It is the game I come back to often. I love to be in that harsh world, and coming back to Majula feels like coming home at times. I put on the Majula soundtrack as background music when I write or just sit on the bus to work. I love this game. So what is it trying to say? All art, no matter who made it or what kind of medium it is, has a message. It might be as simple as the cruelty of living, but struggling forward regardless, like Berserk, or as simple as we just want to entertain you, like Vampire Survivor. Both stances are equally valid. And I would even argue that it don't matter what the artist tried to convey with their art. What matters is what you take from it, that to the artist and all that. So what is Dark Souls 2 trying to say? To start with, Dark Souls 2 is the sequel to Dark Souls 1 and got released in 2014 after a very difficult development process. That the game is as coherent as it is a miracle, and the game is seen somewhat as the black sheep of a trilogy. Dark Souls 3 stays way closer to Dark Souls 1 in gameplay and themes, for me at least. I would even argue that Dark Souls 3 is the true sequel to Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 2 is more of a spin-off, like Dark Souls A, if that makes sense. So let's begin our journey in Dark Souls 2, shall we? The game takes place after Dark Souls 1. Your first question might be, if you have played Dark Souls 1, is, well, what ending is it following? Is it following Linking the Fire or the Dark Lord ending? We don't know, and I would even argue that it doesn't matter. The question itself is irrelevant, but I will come back to that. You are an undead, branded by the curse, and you are seeking a cure. And you have come to the land of Drangleic, said to be the place where a cure can be found. How you came here doesn't really matter, because one of the big themes of Dark Souls 2 is memory, and the loss of it. When you start, you are a nameless, unknown undead. You have no name, nor class, and no decent armor. You are a blank slate. It is not before you meet the last Firekeepers where you get to enter the character creator and where you get to define yourself. And you do this after the Firekeepers give you a human effigy. What is a human effigy? It is this game's humanity from Dark Souls 1. It reverses the effect of hollowing. But what does it mean to go hollow? The meaning is in its name. You go hollow. You lose your humanity and become an undead. And you forget who you are. Your memories fade, and so does your personality. It is the explanation of why most human enemies attack you on sight. They have gone hollow and blindly attack anyone that comes near them. All empathy and compassion are gone, and there is one more side effect, as I understand it at least. You become somewhat immortal. You are undead in that you can't die with the passage of time. People can put you to death with weapons and magic with great effort, but time can't kill you. And you might think that as a blessing for the moment. But being alive long after you should have died is a nightmare. So you found it, right? If you go hollow again, just use a human effigy again and reverse the effect. If only it was that simple. Yes, human effigies reverses the effect of hollowing, but it doesn't cure it. It merely treats the symptom, and the item itself is not rare, but you won't find an unlimited supply of them. And you're still undead, marked with the dark sign, a black hole on your back surrounded by a circle of fire. So you go on and exit the Firekeeper's hut, and you reach Majula, the hub of this game. Here you will find, with time, your blacksmith, the merchant, and another Firekeeper, the Emerald Herald. And if you give souls to her, she can level you up. If you have played Demon Souls before, she is the Maiden in Black, and she tells you to seek Vendrick, the king of these lands. Talking to her reveals a lot of what the game is trying to say and giving you clues on what to do. So we are going to unravel what she is saying. She tells you that she will remain by your side until this frail hope shatters. She tells you to seek misery. She tells you to seek the king. And she tells you to seek the 4 immense souls in these lands. So what does that mean? There is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with hope. I shall remain by your side until this frail hope shatters. Hope. It is the reason you came here. A desperate hope that there is a cure in these lands. But if you're playing this game, you have probably played Dark Souls 1. And you know how hard that game is. So this game will be just as hard, maybe even harder. You will die, over and over and over again. The Firekeepers before told you as much. There are bosses you will fight that feels like a brick wall, impossible to climb or break through. And yet you will get up and try again, because you have hope. And yet, it is so fragile. Tell me, have you ever quit out of a game after dying to a boss? I have. Have you stopped playing after dying to what feels like a bullshit hit? I have. All those times, hope shattered, and I hollowed. I remember this one run I had in Dark Souls 1, where I had reached the Duke's Archive in full Havel's armor and the Dragon Tooth. And I died to one of those crystals enemies, and I stopped playing. That character is still in those archives. You could say that she hollowed, that her hope shattered, and now she walks endlessly in those archives. The thing that keeps Undead going is hope. And when that hope finally shatters, you are truly gone. She also tells you to seek misery. Well, that is just the mission statement of the whole series. Seek hard areas, hard bosses and enemies, and you will go stronger after each defeat of them. Misery leads to strength, so long as you keep hope alive. She tells you to seek Vendrick, he who built this kingdom, and she tells you that you can't reach him with your current weak soul. Here she gives you a goal, to seek the king. Maybe he found a cure for the hollowing, but she tells you that you need to go stronger, so that you can reach him. She tells you to seek the 4 immense souls. For the moment this is a bit cryptic, but if you paid attention to the lore of Dark Souls 1, this might ring a bell. There were 4 lords in that game: Nito, Gwyn, Seath, and the Witch of Isoleth. Maybe the game is telling us to remember what we learned from the previous game. Maybe that there are parallels being drawn to it. I feel like all these lines lays out the mission statement of the game. This game will be hard and you will die. But as long as you have hope, she will be by your side, helping in any way she can. You won't be alone, and this game will build upon what came before. There will be new miseries to face, and new ideas and concepts to learn. Well, that was a lot. And with that rolling around in our skull, we head out into Drangleic searching for a cure and the king. The first area you will probably reach is the Forest of Fallen Giant. It is a forest that leads into an old fort, where the kingdom of Drangleic fought the giants. This is one of the major events of the world's history. King Vendrick sailed across the ocean to the land of the giants and took something from them. What he took is unknown, and his kingdom prospered afterwards, for a time. But then the giants invaded, and a war broke loose. You see remnants of that war everywhere, holes in walls, broken roofs, fallen statues, and the soldiers walking around. Everything is hollowed out. You are walking around in a memory of a moment, and it is slowly fading away. But at the bottom of the fort you will find the last giant. He is the first boss of the game. He is not super hard to fight compared to what the game has to offer, but compared to the other bosses in the series, he can be a bit tricky. And he gets mad when he sees you, enough to break his chains just so he can fight you. He hates you so much that he rips off his arm just so he has something else to hit you with. What cruelty did Wendrick inflict upon the giants that this kind of hate still lingers? The Forest of the Fallen Giants is a sad place, a battlefield where the soldiers still linger, fighting anything they see, and it's a place slowly being forgotten, like the next place that we visit. The Tower of Heidi's Flame is one of the shorter places, and yet one of the most beautiful. It is a place that is sinking into the sea. We are walking on top of the highest places of a kingdom that is long gone, and all that is left are the spires, towers, and the highest cathedrals. There is not much to note of here, besides what we find in the cathedral beyond the Wyvern. In it we find Ornstein from Dark Souls 1. If it's the real Ornstein, a clone, or a ghost is unknown, and that question doesn't interest me. What interests me is what I think Ornstein represents in this area. Hai's Tower of Flame reminds me and many other people of Anor Londo, the grand spires and cathedrals. Ornstein to me is the answer to the question, what is this place? This place is some kind of version of Anor Londo, but not the way that you think. I think it's someone that is trying to remember the old glories, but they have forgotten the details. There are no mentions of the gods from Dark Souls 1, nor are there any statues of them. All those grand things that seemed so important in Dark Souls 1 are gone, replaced with imitations by people trying to remember, reliving old glories but forgotten the names. From here we travel to No Man's Wharf, and then to the Bastille. No Man's Wharfs don't have much to say. It is a town inside a cave, like a pirate town in a movie. Here you take the boat to the Bastille. The Bastille is a prison where Wendrick locked away the things he had no use for. The Bastille is also light in commentary. It's a prison and an asylum. The unwanted and forgotten are locked away here. But there are some things of note. There are 2 NPCs of note that we will talk about later. And the other major thing is the last boss of the area, which has one of the immense souls which the Emerald Herald mentioned, the Lost Sinner. When you defeat her and read her soul, it says, "Souls of the Lost Sinner, prisoners of sinners rise. The Lost Sinner eternally punishes herself for the sins of the past." What sin did she commit that she got locked away here in the deepest parts of the Bastille? Well, we get the clue from the cinematic that plays when we first meet her. There is a bug that crawls into the eye socket of the mask. And if you have played Dark Souls 1, you have seen this bug before. In a lost fallen city deep underground, surrounded by lava and a dome, lived what remains of the Witch of Chaos. It's the same bug that you slew. Is the sinner somehow related to the Witch of Isolate? We get our answers if we return here in New Game Plus or use a bonfire aesthetic. If you defeat her, then you are rewarded with a second soul, Old Witch Soul, one of the ineffable. This once magnificent soul continues to exert influence over the land, even after eons have reduced it to these remnants. And to put the final nail in the coffin, you can use this soul to form the Chaos Blade, the same blade that you could make in Dark Souls 1 from the Witch's soul. It seems that her soul lived on after Dark Souls 1. I don't know if it's her exact soul, but at least the memory of her lingers, and her sin trying to remake the first flame lives on in these lands. It seems that the past is, well, not repeating, but rhyming. Just as the Forest of Fallen Giants are stuck in the past, it seems the whole world is stuck in a cycle, trying to remember and recreate the past over and over again. We will return to what this implies later. You claim the first immense souls. There are 3 more to find. The next area we arrive at is the Huntsman Copse. It is a dark forest filled with hollows and what I can only describe as prisons. Someone tried to deal with the undead by locking them away. You also find the Undead Purgatory, a Colosseum-like structure where an undead horse runs around in a circle endlessly, killing the undead. This place is awful. The one that ruled these lands could only think of one way to deal with the undead, locking them away and punishing them forever. They built a hell on earth, being endlessly punished for the sin of being born. We can make some guesses who did this, and my souls are on Vendrick, but I don't think he was the first person that had the idea to do this, for you see, when you defeat the boss of the area, the Skeleton Kings, you learn this from their souls. The old Iron King commanded the capture of all undead, but those charged with the task were overcome by the curse. The old Iron King is a character that will come up a lot in this game, and I will talk more about him when we reach his castle. But it seems that Vendrick took some inspiration from the old Iron King when it came to dealing with the undead. But past the corpse, we arrive at Harvest Valley. It is a giant open mine. You will find holes in the ground everywhere. They were digging after minerals and ore. Great chunks of earth have been dug out, and the only thing left in them is poison. We have found a poison swamp for the game. To be fair, it's one of the easier swamps in the series, but it's still a harsh place. You will also find a lot of material here, like Titanite shards and infused gems. The old Iron King mined this area dry, dug out all he could, and then continued to mine. And when his workers turned undead, he threw them into the corpse. He doesn't seem like a good king. Past the mines we find the Earthen Peak, the headquarters of the mine. It also seems to be the processing place of what was dug up from the mine. We just find more undead and poison. There is not much to go over, so we will head on to the next area, the Iron Keep, the old Iron King's castle. It sits in the middle of a lake of lava, and it is slowly sinking under its own weight. We find grand architectures here and the Iron King's soldier, samurai-inspired knights who still guard their king's home. But where is the old Iron King? We find him, or what is left of him, at the end of the castle. We fight what I can only describe as a demon coming out of the lava, and with the defeat of him, we claim his soul. Soul of the old Iron King, who succumbed to the flame that swallowed his castle. The Iron King's flesh was charred, and his soul possessed by the things that lurk below. Does this remind you of someone you have met before? There is another clue if you defeat him on New Game Plus, where we get the old King's soul. Just as the old sinner paralleled the Witch of Isolate, the old Iron King parallels Gwyn, the king who built a glorious kingdom that made wonders and spread far and wide. But the king died from his ambitions. Gwyn refused to accept the fading of the flame and fed himself to it. The old Iron King built a magnificent iron castle, but he also refused to accept that it was sinking into the lava, and so he fed himself to it. Again, not an exact repeat, but it rhymes. But what are the things that lurk below that is mentioned in the soul? To be honest, they are what you want them to be. There are some candidates, and the things that lurk below are never mentioned again. But I take them as a clue about the game's themes. We know that the old Iron King mirrors Gwyn. The thing that lurks below might just be a clue about the game's story. That there are deeper layers, deeper themes. Things under the surface that we don't see that affect the world. We have to go deeper to learn more. The old Iron King was another immense soul, so we may make it back to Majula to rest and find a new path. By now you have probably noticed that the world map doesn't really make sense. The areas themselves are thought out and planned, but how they are connected are a bit loose. It's an old meme already that the elevator in Earthen Peak to the old Iron King's castle makes no sense with the area, and there are out-of-game reasons for this. The development of Dark Souls 2 was rough, to say the least. That the game got finished is a miracle of itself. The original story was way different, involving a pendulum of time and a child Emerald Herald. There was also meant to be a stronger emphasis on light and dark in the game. There would be some areas in the game where you would be forced to choose between having two hands free or offer one hand to hold a torch to bring light to the dark. All those ideas can still be found in the game, but way smaller and changed around. The light mechanic is here, but is way toned down. There is a time element to the plot, but it's also changed around. Coming back to the levels, as I understand it, they had a lot of the levels already made in mid-development when they had to change the game. So they just had to use what they had and stitch together a game from that. Hence, why it feels like sometimes it is just thrown together in the last minute. In some places, I'm sure it was. And yet they managed to make a wonderful game. There are 2 more unique souls to get, so let's go to the woods. The shaded woods feels like a troll attempt from the developers, and I love it. You see, the enemies here are invisible, aka you can't target them, but you still need to fight them. And the first area is full of mist, making it so they blend into the forest. These buggers are so irritating, and I love them. They also make a really cozy forest. It reminds me of my childhood, walking in an early September forest. It has rained in the night, and you can tell autumn is coming, but the summer is still here. Again, there are some interesting NPCs in the areas, but we will leave them for later. After the forest, we arrive in a cave system and gets reminded that this game is stitched together of what remains. But it also gives a lot of vibes to me, at least. The kingdom is large and have incorporated a lot of places and cultures. And yet the areas have been forgotten to the sands of time. And we reach the final place on our road, a mining town. This place could have been an outpost for the old Iron King, since it's another mining town. Or it could be another town that was under the rule of Drangleic. It is up to you to decide that, and that is the beauty of the Dark Souls game. The story is what you make of it. But it's what we find at the end of the area that interests me. We find a giant spider next to a dragon's skull. The spider is another of the immense souls, and when we defeat it, we get its soul's which state. The writing ruin is an ancient thing whose shadow remains cast over the land. It first took possession of a solitary insect, but grew its power, festering on the wealth of twisted souls found in these lands. At first, who it might be referencing is a bit thin, but again becomes clear on New Game Plus when we get the Pale Drake soul. There has only been one Pale Drake in the game, and that is Seats the Scaleless. What is left of his soul possessed the spider, and it broke out of its cage that we can find, and brought ruin on the town. What is interesting is what they are mining in this place is called bright crystals. And Seat got obsessed by crystals in Dark Souls 1. Again, not a repeat, but rhyming. Only have one soul left, and it lays at the bottom of the pit in Majula. There are many ways down, and you can either go to the bottom or make a stop at the grave of Saint and find the Rat Covenant. If we go deeper still, we come to Blightstone 2.0, the gutter. The pit is where Drangleic threw all its trash and unwanted things. There is a town here, built on the leftover debris and trash. It is a town for the forgotten and unwanted. If we go deeper, we reach the bowels of the earth and come to find the Rotten. The Rotten is just a mass of undead that has been making the poison-throwing statues that we found on our way down. And it's the last immense soul that we need. If we slay it, we get the soul that's freed. The Rotten embraces all in its sanctuary, for all things wanted are tossed away. And if you play Dark Souls 1 before, you can guess what ineffable soul we find if we kill the Rotten. Old One's dead soul. Nito, the first of the dead, continued to do what he always do, Embrace everyone in death. There is a place for you down here, no matter who you are or what you have done. The dark and death welcomes all. But I like to make a point here. They are not down here because they want to. They were thrown down here, made to live here as outcasts and wretches, and yet they built something down here for themselves. They made homes down here in the dark, and they would embrace anyone that came here. And there is beauty in that. As you light the last primal bonfire, it explodes, and you come to meet with Oldia, scholar of the first sin. He is Vendrick's brother. He comments that it has been a while since a young Hollow came this far. You are not the first to set foot on this path, and Aldia has seen many that has tried and failed. He tells you to face the hardship that are ahead of you. But he also asks you a question. Will you inherit the order of the world or destroy it? What he is getting at is the question that Dark Souls 1 grappled with. Link the fire or become the Dark Lord. But he says that only a true monarch can make such a choice. And you are not that. But you can become one if you continue on our journey. We have the 4 immense souls now, and after a long journey, you have finished your first goal and can finally go and seek out King Vendrick in his castle. But, do you remember why you came here? Did you come here seeking the king to find 4 immense souls? No, you came here seeking a cure for the hollowing. Did you forget that? Have you started to hollow? I like this little trick that the game is playing on you. It gives you a goal at the start and then throws so many other things at you that your first goal fades into the background. With the reminder, you head off towards the castle. You have seen it every time you have come to Majula, and you know the destination. The castle is enveloped in heavy rain. Just looking at it, you can tell it's a sad place. All the glory and splendor is gone. On the way up, you find the king's experiments, and his soldiers, and treasure, and his queen. After all, if there is a king, there has to be a queen, right? Her name is Nashandra, and you will have a distant relationship with her. She will be your guide for this part of the journey, telling you where to go and what to do. And she has some insight into Vendrick. You have fought admirably on your journey, cursed undead. I am Nashandra, Queen of Drangleic. A true monarch carries the weight of their soul. The last king of this land, King Vendrick, as he was called. He was less of a king than you might imagine. He found the strength to rule his people, and when the undead was born, cursed, he found more strength to face them, but in the end, he never took the true throne. He was less of a king than you might imagine. Now, why is that? At a glance it looks like he did all the things expected of a king. He ruled his kingdom and grew it and built grand monuments. But what did she say? He never took the true throne. What did Aldia say? Inherit the order of the world or destroy it. It seems that Vendrick could have linked the flame and taken the throne, but failed to do so. We will come back to this when we meet him. Past the castle, you come to what some people say is the worst area in Dark Souls 2, the Shrine of Amana. But to me, it is one of my favorite areas, mostly because it's so beautiful there. It feels like you're walking through a fey forest, but it's also full of long-range spellcasters and bullshit. It is a Dark Souls level after all. And you do meet some interesting people here. You meet the Milfanito, who tells you that the great dead one taught them the song to soothe the ones bound by death and the dark. If there are some kind of descendants of Nito, or some kind of creation of his, we will never know. But as long as they sing, the enemies of the areas are calm. Their song is beautiful, but we can't stay to listen, so we move forward. And we arrive at the Undead Crypt. As you're about to rest at the bonfire, it explodes, and you meet Oldie again, and he drops one of the hardest lines in the trilogy. Once the Lord of Light banished dark and all that stemmed from humanity, and men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props on the stage of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie. What they are trying to tell you with this is the big twist that you could have found in Dark Souls 1. That Gwyn, the first Lord of Light, shackled humanity, afraid of the age of dark humans would bring one day. And that twisted humanity at its core. Humans were as grand as the gods once, and then we were smothered in our crib, our potential snubbed, and a brand of fire were placed upon our dark souls. To inherit the world order is to keep this system going. It is to keep the brand upon ourselves, and to endlessly feed the fire. With these passing words, Oldia leaves and you enter the crypt. It is a place where the undead can rest undisturbed. They can't die here, but the outside world won't bother them here. There is a place here in the dark for you, and you are disturbing their rest by just walking in. But you head on, and at the bottom of the crypt, after a hard boss fight and some of the most elite soldiers of his kingdom, you find the king, the one with the answer, the one that built this kingdom, your goal. And he is hollow. He is naked, walking around in a circle over and over again. Even this grand being could not stop the hollowing. If he couldn't, what chance do you have? There are no answers with the dead, it seems. You loot what you can. You find his ring, which grants you access to the king's gate, which you have seen around the kingdom. You also meet the Emerald Herald again. She tells you to head east, for to become a monarch you have to walk those grounds. And what else can you do at this point? There is not much of the world left to explore beside the gates that the ring unlocks, so we head to the east. Beyond the shaded wood we come to Aldia's manor. Here we find his experiments and his laboratory. He searched for a way to break the curse of the undead and to understand the soul, and he did find answers, but he didn't like them. He learned about the logic of the world that was set up by Gwyn, how humans were once one with the dark and could rival the gods when the fire faded, how they were shackled with the brand and then led to feed the fire, so Gwyn's age wouldn't fade. And how this has been going on gods know how long. No one remembers Gwyn's name anymore, but his legacy endures. His age still rolls on. Something broke in Aldia when he learned about this. Same with Wendrick. After all, Wendrick had access to the true throne. What this game calls a true monarch is just someone that can link the fire and usher in the true glory of the flame again. But is that even something you want to do? You have seen the world, the state of it. It is itself hollowing out, forgetting its own past, but it keeps going forward nevertheless. You fight through the horrors of the mansion and reach the Dragonary, a place where dragons still can be found, or what is left of them at least. And here you meet Shanalot, the true Emerald Herald. What we have met before was a projection of her, and she tells us to seek the ancient dragon for answers. As we're about to set into the castle part of the area, we meet Aldia for one final time. He talks about the world again, this time focusing on the beauty that can still be found in a lie. We now know that the world we live in is built upon a lie so old that we have even forgotten what it is. or who even told it, but look at what it has brought us. All the places you have seen and been to, all the people you have met, they are results of the lie that we are living. We can answer some of his questions, but it don't matter, as he mostly monologues at us. He is trying to grapple with his own internal struggle of what he feels about all of this. He could not break the chains that set upon the world, and he knows the world is a lie, and yet he can't stop loving it in some way. He asked us to seek the throne, and we will. What else can we do at this point? We seek out the ancient dragon and make our way to the very top, or at least what looks like an ancient dragon. If we go to Nashandra after meeting the dragon, she will tell us it's a prop, a false deity. The dragon is non-hostile, and it will give us the Ashen Mist Heart, an object that lets you live the memory of beings. But you can fight it, and if you do and win, you are not rewarded with a dragon soul or anything like that. You are rewarded with a giant souls and a dragon scale. Maybe this thing truly was an experiment by Oldia, but we will never know. Just another mystery that the world have forgotten the answers to. It also drops some interesting dialogue. Murk shifts and stir. Yet another stand before us. And so be it. For the curse of life is the curse of want. And so you peer into the fog in hope of answers. The curse of life is the curse of want. We have heard talk about this curse. The Crestfallen Knight talks about it. The Emerald Herald talks about it. It seems that having a soul means that you are cursed with want and desire. A very Buddhist perspective on life, that suffering comes from desire and wants. Dragons are above that. They were everlasting because they had no needs or wants, but they could not grow or change. Hence they were made of stone. We are nearing the end of our journey. There is not much left to explore before reaching the Throne of Want. So let's make some detours. There are some NPCs that I want to talk about before we head into the DLC and the endgame. Let's start with Vengral, the head. You meet him in the shaded woods, and at first he doesn't want to talk to you. You are disturbing his peace, but he comes around to it. It is nice to flap his gums after all. He talks about how he was a mercenary, hired to kill, and he was good at it. But even the strongest warriors will find someone that can best them. And he was killed, or so he thought. He woke up without a body, and he was stuck where he is. He could still feel his body out there, wandering like the undead he is. But with time he started contemplating on his life, and what had led him to this point, and watching the night sky, seeing the day pass by. He had found something soothing in it. He is content with where he is. He has reached some sort of enlightenment. You can kill his body for him, and he is thankful for it, mostly because it won't hurt anyone anymore, and he can spend the rest of his time here in peace. There is no deep message or understanding with him. I just think he's an interesting story, that not all undead despair. The next NPC I want to talk about is Stark. He is a half-man, half-scorpion, and you find him not far from Vengral. You need a special ring to talk to him, and doing so you surprise him. Most humans are afraid of him and avoid him. He talks about his master that made him, and it is implied that it's Seath the Scaleless that made him, and his better half long ago. He talks about the flaw in Seath, that he was seeking something that he lacked, but it was not the scale that they truly lacked. Our master was a very lonely soul. He is the only pale dragon. He wanted the scales to make him whole, but what he really needed was a friend, a true friend, someone that could understand him, understand his sorrow of being an outcast. Back to Tark. He asks you to kill his better half, the boss in the next area. You can summon him for the fight if you want. He will also mention that the Duke dares Freya is similar to him and his better half. It seems that the spider was also an experiment of Seath long ago, and he comments on after killing the spider that his master will be back one day. Seath will see it for all eternity, and he prays for our journey, even though he has no gods to pray to. He is a sweet little boy. In the Bastille you find a lot of things locked away and forgotten. One of them is Stride of Olafis. He is a sorcerer from the land of Olafis, and he will teach you magic if your intelligence and faith is high enough. But it's not that makes him interesting. No, what makes him memorable is his dialogue. He talks about he is from the land of Olafis, and he is the only NPC in the entire game that mentions the land. He has never heard of Drangleic, so he concludes that Drangleic is the land that rose atop of the ashes of Olafis. Straight confirms our suspicions that many kingdoms have risen and fall on this place, so many that they are forgotten and buried so far down that no one can find them or remember them. And this has been going on since the dawn of the Age of Fire. He even mentions that even if the fire would go out, from the ashes it would reignite again, and a new kingdom would rise from the ashes, and all of this would play out again. We are truly cursed. That is why you find the four immense zones here. Lordran was built here long, long ago. There is one more NPC I want to talk about before we head into the DLC, and it might be one of the most important NPCs in the game. Lucatil. Most people meet her in No Man's Wars for the first time. She is a bit of standoffish at the start, but she comes around to you. She has come to these lands for the same reason as you, to find a cure for the hollowing. She likes the companionships that you can offer, so she agrees to help you where she can, and after that you can summon her for many boss fights that you will come across in your journey. There is one more thing that strikes you as you leave her for the first time. She seems to have very low self-esteem of herself. Whatever happens to me, I won't be missed. You will meet her again across your journey and learn more about her. She talks about her homeland of Mira, where the only way to rise in rank was to fight by the sword. You learn about her older brother that she never won against, and she thinks he also fell to the curse of following. She thinks he also came to Drangleic seeking a cure, and every time you meet her, she has hollowed out a bit more. You get to see firsthand of what happens to undead that is undergoing the hollowing, and it is heartbreaking to witness. She wishes that someone would hear her tale, that someone will remember her. Next to the last time you meet her, she drops one of the rawest lines that might have been written in this trilogy. What is this curse? This question rings in my mind, but I haven't the focus to answer it. Loss frightens me to no end. Loss of memory, loss of self. If I were told by killing you I would be freed of this curse, then I would draw my sword without hesitation. I don't want to die, I want to exist. I would sacrifice anything at all for this. It shames me, but it's the truth. Sometimes I feel obsessed, insignificant thing called self, but even so, I am compelled to preserve it. Am I wrong to feel so? Surely you do the same in my shoes. Maybe we're all cursed. From the moment we are born, we are all afraid of death in some way. We want to keep on existing. To be alive is such a joy, and we are compelled to live on by our genes, society, and what I can only describe as the human spirit. And according to Buddhist belief, this is the cause of suffering, because there is no self to preserve. We are all part of a greater whole. We are part of nature, of society, and to establish a clear line of where you begin and end only leads to madness. Yet we are humans, and letting go like Buddha is hard, because there is something human about being oneself. We know that humans in Dark Souls are born with the dark souls in them, and it's that keeps us immortal and gives us the will to go on, and letting go of the other soul would let us be more human, to be our true self. But as Aldia said, this wonderful falsehood, it is not easy to give up something that feels real to you, something that feels part of you, even though logically you know it isn't real. Lucatil's wants and fears could be seen as a statement on the whole trilogy. The whole tragedy of the world was started by Gwyn and his fear of the death and dark, and he would do anything, sacrifice anything to keep his world going. He was obsessed by the insignificant thing called self. But is it wrong to feel so? Is it immoral to feel so? I don't think so. The fear, that want, it is only human. All humans in Dark Souls or on Earth is cursed from the moment we are born. It is why the game sticks with you. It is why you sit up at night thinking about them. The last time you meet Lucatil is in front of Aldia's manor. The frail hope that keeps Undead going is fraying and is about to break. She almost doesn't remember you, and she begs you to remember her, because you might not. And after that you don't see her again, and all you can do is remember her, so she doesn't fade into the dark. Memory is a major part of what makes us human. Without it, we would just be beasts. Yet our memories are faulty and wrong. It is the end of the day a lump of meat that proves the capability of remembering. Of course it will malfunction. But the memory of a friend you hurt, even though you don't remember every detail of it, will make it so that you will try to not do it again. The memory of your loved one being home at the end of the day keeps you sane at work. Fading of memory is one of the great tragedies that can happen to humans. The true loss of self is the loss of memory. To hollow is to forget. What would happen if you woke up in the morning not remembering your love? Would you still love them? If you saw them again for the first time with no memory of them, would you still fall in love with them again? Let's continue on our journey. We head back to the Forest of Fallen Giants to enter the memories of the giants. Here we get to see the big war between Drangleic and the giants, and it is an awful war. We can collect some items and a unique set of souls, the soul of the giants. Maybe they can come to some use. We come to one more memory and find the king of the giants, who we fight. At this point our souls has grown large, and the king falls to our onslaught. And we get the giant skinship. It is the key to the final area of the game, and the final boss. And we could head there right now, but there are still some places left to explore. We haven't been to the DLC. The DLCs are usually one of the best things From Software makes, since here they get to expand on some stories and really hone in on some gameplay ideas. We have an item that lets us enter our memories. There was one person that we sought out, someone we wanted to talk to that could maybe help us. We head back to the crypt and we enter the king's memory to talk to Vendrick. He tells us to seek out the crowns of ancient kings and to seek greater hardship, which is just a marketing slogan for the DLC. They are one of the harder contents of the game, and you will get a crown at the end of them. If you have his crown when we talk to him, he talks about how he failed, that he could have taken the throne, but didn't. He found out the grand lie like us, and it broke him. The fragile hope shattered, and he started to hollow. The first crown you usually go after is the crown of the Sunken King. You find the entrance past the Rotten boss area. It is a huge underground cave with a city to explore and a giant temple. The story of the area is pretty simple. Once there was a king and a kingdom. In this kingdom there was a sleeping dragon. The king built his kingdom to worship the great dragon, and his kingdom flourished. But the dragons are wonderful and wanted creatures, so an army came looking for the dragon. They invaded the kingdom and slew the king. They wanted the dragon's blood, believing it would grant them power. But as they pierced the side of the sleeping dragon, they learned the truth. Sin, that's the dragon's name, had been sleeping, but had also eaten all the poison in the area to cleanse it. And when its side was pierced, it could not hold all the poison in itself any longer, and it spewed it out on the kingdom. And the kingdom fell, but the dragon was free. Hunting dragons and the fascination with them is a recurring theme in this trilogy. The intro cinematic for Dark Souls talks about the Dragon War. Dragon fascinates and scares people, because they were here before the first plane. They are beings that lived before life were here. The first flame brought a lot of wonder to the world, but he also brought death to the world. But the dragons were immortal, so if you could become like a dragon, you could live forever. At least, that is the idea. There is one more thing in the DLC I want to talk about, and that is the queen you fight. She is the wrathful queen, and she is gathering up souls to one day bring vengeance to the people that slew her king. But haven't we heard this tale before? A king builds a great kingdom, and a queen comes to him later? We also find that she is a creature of the dark. When the abyss was shattered in Dark Souls with the defeat of Manus, the remnants of it was scattered all around the world. But as the Dark Souls always does, it's coalesced into smaller beings, and one of these shards became the Squalid Queen. With the defeat of the Queen and the Dragon, you claim the Sunken King crown, and Vendrick talks some more to you. There are no new revelations as his talk, mostly confirming the themes and ideas of the game, how all humans have the dark within them and how it keeps on growing. He talks about how he slew the giants and claimed their strength so he could get closer to fire. But he never did take the throne, and when the fire fades, humans will take their true shape and the undead will emerge. We head out again, this time to the Broom Tower, the place where the old Iron King got his start. The sights in this DLC is magnificent. You see as far as the eye can see, the great fields of iron that made the Iron King who he was, and the great towers that he built. You also find another thing as you walk in, ashen idols that seems to talk to you, and as you destroy one of them, you get the fragment of a soul of Natalia, the Bride of Ash. It seems that another fragment of Manus came, looking for a strong king. But when she arrived, he was already gone, sunken into the molten iron. You learn more about the old Iron King as you climb down the tower, and find some interesting people down here, like the Fume Knight. There was a boss in the crypts we didn't talk about, Rhyme. Rhyme and Fume were the left and the right hand of King Vendrick, but the Fume Knight saw what was happening to Vendrick, with the war with the giants and the experiments he started doing on the undead. So Fume decided to leave, and he came to this tower, being embraced by Natalia. It seems that she found a king at last. Fun side note, if you fight the Fume Knight with Rhyme's armor set on, he immediately angers and goes into phase 2. Great storytelling. There is one more boss in the area, but we need the Ashen Mist's heart to enter it. Here you fight alone, the right hand of the old Iron King. He's a samurai, and the reason why the soldiers of the old Iron King fought the way they fought. Alone trained them, but just like Fume, he left when he saw what was happening to the old Iron King. When his greed and ambitions grew too large, Alon decided to leave. But we enter this memory by interacting with the armor and the sword. It seems that the king slew his closest ally. You claim the old Iron King's crown and go to Vendrick. He talks about his dear Nashandra and how she lied to him. This is something you could pick up earlier, but Vendrick's dialogues confirms it. Nashandra is another fragment of Manus, the smallest it seems. She thirsted for power more than any other. The world is truly stuck in a cycle that keeps on rhyming. It seems that when a great kingdom rises, a fragment of the dark soul seeks out the ruler and clings to them. But I don't think they're doing it out of malice. It just seems that what the dark does. It yearns for things and seeks them out. Yes, Nashandra is coded to be evil, as she corrupted the king and made him do bad things, but she was born this way. We see the other queens were different. The Sunken King was killed, and she grieved him and wanted vengeance for that. And Natalia just wanted someone by her side. They are not evil. They just seem lonely and wanting. They are humans. But there is one more crown to claim, and it is one of the best DLCs that From has ever made. We go north to frozen Melium Lois. It is a frozen land filled with ice and snow, and we are not welcome here. Our voice tells us to leave, and if we go to a certain direction, we will find an invisible boss. But you can explore the city, and with time you find the eyes of the priestess, and you can see the boss of the area, and the invisible people in the shaded woods. When you defeat the boss, which turns out to be a giant cat, you can enter the castle of the kingdom and meet the queen. She tells you that this land was built to guard the chaos that lives below, and that her king ruled for a long time and the land prospered. But one day the king had to go down into the chaos to stop it from spreading, and he trusted her with the task of ruling the kingdom in his absence, and the king has not been seen since. You can figure out who the queen is. She is another shard of menace. But this one is not hostile. The kindness of the king helped her and gave her confidence. It seems that the dark is deep and complex, and not just filled with monsters like Wynne would have you believe. She asks one thing of you, to go down into the chaos and kill what remains of the king, so that he may rest. So you jump down into the area, and you get stumped. There are so many soldiers down here to fight on your own, but she tells you not to worry. There are still loyal soldiers in Eliam Lois. Find them, and they will answer the call one more time. So you go on one more expedition. You find the soldiers and jump down one more time. The fight is hard, and one by one the soldiers sacrifice themselves to stop the portals where the enemy spawn in, and at last he arrives, and one of the best fucking soundtracks of the game starts off. Burn Ivory King is a fucking banger. So you kill the king, and the queen is grateful, and you collect the last crown. But there is one easy thing to miss in this fight. If you go and look at the summons that you can bring into this fight, you will find that one is familiar and you haven't seen in a really long time. It's Lucatiles. I don't know if it's just a reference or it's meant to be something more, but I was so happy to find her here. To me, it means that she managed to keep a hold of that fragile hope, that she didn't hollow completely. Maybe she made her way here from Aldia's Manor and found some purpose, and that makes me happy. With the last crown, we go and visit Vendrick, and it tells us that the fire will fade, and asks, is this our only choice? To feed the fire, let it rise and then fade again, only to feed it again. This is the reason why he didn't take the true throne. He saw the system that was in place and despaired. It tells us to seek strength and do what you think is right. And he blesses the crowns and gives you a gift. If you wear the crown and dies, you won't hollow. You have found what you came here for, right? A cure for the hollowing. Do you feel happy, elated, or do you still feel hollow? Because again, you are not cured. You are only ignoring the symptoms. The cure is limited. You need to keep the crown upon your head forever, and you can't share this with anyone. But with a cure in hand, no matter how limited, you head into the final area, the Throne of Want. You meet the Emerald Herald on the path who tells you that Nashandra will follow you and will try to take the throne from you. The Emerald Herald tells you that she was an experiment by Aldia and Vendrick, made by men born from dragons, in hopes that she could break the cycle, but fate would not be bested. That is why you only meet the real Emerald Herald up in the dragon area. She is half dragon, and she has chosen to lead Undead on a journey to find the Throne of Want. She has taken up the purpose of being a firekeeper, in hope that someone would link the fire. You enter the area and fight the Guardians, and Ashandra walks in. She tells you to become one with the dark. She is not a hard boss, and she will fall to your strength. And one more boss appears. Aldia. Aldia is similar to Nashandra in that he is also a semi-easy boss. While you fight him, I can only conclude his gameplay reason, because all this time he has been talking about you, and he hasn't shown any ill intent to you. You defeat him nevertheless, and he asks you one more time, what do you want? What do you want to do? And you have two choices, take the throne or walk away. If you take the throne, it is assumed that you link the fire, and all of this will play out again. The cycle will repeat. If you walk away, you make the same choice that Vendrick did, and you saw what that leads. But that is your choice to make. And then the game ends. Do you remember the question of what ending we were following from Dark Souls 1? Well, here is the answer. It doesn't matter. If you link the fire, you would be here without knowing why. Or if you became the Dark Lord, someone else would link the fire. The world is stuck. Gwyn fundamentally broke the world. Dark Souls 2 raises a lot of questions, and there are not many answers, because it wants you to ponder these questions and come to your own conclusion. as Aldi asks, what do you want? What do you want to do? One thing that I have taken from Dark Souls 2, which gets contradicted in Dark Souls 2, but bear with me, is that Gwyn fundamentally broke the world. The world broke somehow when he linked the fire, and there might not be a way to fix it. It is stuck in this awful cycle, and it will just keep going on like this. Fire will fade, undead will emerge, someone will link the fire again, and all of this will play out again. The question is not how do you fix this? No, the question is what do you do now? How do you live in such a world? A world that is fundamentally broken. How do you find meaning and happiness in it? To that the game doesn't answer. It only asks the questions and hopes that you will find the answers for yourself. Tied to this broken world is the concept of following. We have seen the effects of linking the fire has on the world. People are forgetting everything. Their history is lost to them. Who they even are is also fading. And again the game asks you, what do you do with this knowledge? Your memories will fade with time. Who you are will change and hollow if you live long enough. What do you do with this knowledge? Here the game gives one answer. Seek friendships and communities. Lucatil asks you to remember her story and name. Since she will forget. She will hollow, but we will remember her, and she will live on with us, until we hollow ourselves. All we can hope for is that someone will remember us. I also think that is the reason she is in Elysium Lois. We remembered her, and therefore her hope didn't fully break. One last major theme of the game is kingship. What makes a true monarch? Is it strength? I would argue no. A true monarch is someone that can unite their people and make their kingdom prosper, and when the time comes in the end, they will sacrifice themselves for their people, like the burnt Ivory King did. But we also see many bad monarchs. We see the endless examples of the bad rulers of this game. And again the game asks, how do you live in a world like this, where the rulers of the land doesn't care about you? They only see you as a tool to be used. Most kings built great kingdoms and dwell deep into sorcery or fate. But what their subjects really wanted was for them to take the true throne, to link the fire, so that they could die, so that the curse would fade for a while. But that would mean that the monarch would serve the people and not the other way around. And as Aldia says, only a true monarch can make such a choice. As I said, raises a lot of questions and will let you find the answers. It is why the game has stuck with so many people, and why I would argue it is a better sequel than Dark Souls 3. But that is just my opinion. There is one more thing I want to talk about. You remember why you came here? To seek a cure for the hollowing? Well, there is a third one. Kinda. It is a cure like the human effigies or the crown, but it's also different from those two. Return to the Shrine of Amana, find the hidden bonfire, and you will find more Milfenitos and a flame that they are guarding. If you come to the flame hollowed, with no more humanities in your inventory, it will reverse the effect of the hollowing, and it will do so forever. It seems that the legends were true after all, and that it only works for those who are truly desperate, that have no more human effigies and are close to breaking. After you have found it, you can return to this flame over and over again to cure the hollowing. It seems that you finally found a cure. Dark Souls 2 is a wonderful game. Thank you for listening.